Our presenters of our main talk today drove all the way from Kansas City, Missouri to do this talk, okay? And so we're so grateful they are here. I don't want to tell you too much in the introduction because they're going to tell you their story themselves, but they are James and Michelle Morgan. They are former clergy. They have a compelling story that they're going to share with us. And they are active members of Kansas City Oasis, one of 8 Oasis communities meeting across North America this morning. And it's just so fun to be part of this growing movement of people across the country dedicated to building secular communities of compassion and reason. And you're going to realize in a few minutes why these guys are so beloved at Kansas City Oasis. So we're just super grateful that they made the journey. Just one caveat, I may have accidentally kept them up a tad late last night. So, for which I am remorseful. I've been a bad host. So anyway, let's give a warm welcome to Houston Oasis, to James and Michelle.
It wasn't so much the late hour, it was the many beverages that were consumed. For James in particular. Thank you so much. We are thrilled to be here this morning with all of you. Before we get started, we have a bit of a disclaimer, I guess. Want to just put it out there up front and let you know that our story is a bit sordid and scandalous, and that it's not something that we're necessarily proud of. We hurt a lot of people when we left the church, and it was a very painful, difficult process for everyone. However, we're hoping that in sharing our story with all of you, we can help create a greater understanding between faithful and faithless. Is that what we are? Are we faithless?
We're faithful.
No, people. So anyway, just to create some compassion and understanding on both sides. And so with that, we'll get going, I guess.
All right.
Yeah.
So the year was 1992. I was basically at the end of my rope. I grew up in a non-Christian home in Southern California, and very early on started smoking pot every day, and got kicked out of a couple of high schools and dropped out of a third, and was just kind of living a somewhat miserable life, living to have a good time, fairly sick of who I was, and happened to, I'm making a very long story short, happened to wander into a church at just the right time in my life, and said the sinner's prayer, and I was ripe for the picking, really. I was looking for a fresh start, a clean slate, a new beginning, and that is exactly what Christianity offered to me, and I embraced it wholeheartedly. I believed with every fiber of my being, and big changes immediately took place for me. Job, I hadn't been able to keep a job. I got a job. I got sober, and have been sober until last night. Thanks a lot. That's not true. But all of the typical, Christian-ish things. Stopped cussing. Embraced celibacy. Started a Bible study in my house. Within 3 months of my conversion, I was teaching a Bible study in my living room. Went off, preaching on the beach. Used to carry this 6-foot cross down the beach, and we'd go. Sickening. And all of it. I just dove in, and within 18 months, I was off at Bible college and studying to be a pastor, and I felt like nobody was talking to people in my generation about Jesus in a way that they could understand, and that became my passion, was to just try and explain the gospel and who Christ is to people in a way that they could grasp. And so I'm at Bible college, and God speaks to me at Bible college and tells me to marry this girl, and that's primarily what God speaks to people about in Bible college. If you ever anything about Bible Bible college. He's not talking about how to, solve world hunger or anything like that. Just who to marry is on his mind. So I married a young woman and moved to Northwest Missouri to plant my first church. And I loved Jesus with all my heart. And so left my home and family and friends in Southern California and moved to Northwest Missouri, started a church in the basement, and lived to save souls, basically. And one of the reasons why I point this out about how much I love Jesus is that when I tell my story to Christians these days, typically one of the common responses as well, you never really believed, you weren't really, you didn't study it right, or you must not have got it, or you were there for the wrong reasons. I loved Jesus because, in my view, he saved my life, and he gave me hope and peace and purpose, and I wasn't serving him and doing all the things I was doing to earn my salvation, but because it was a response to what he had graciously done for me. And I committed my whole heart, soul, life to him. And the church did well. I had a successful ministry. This is my younger brother, apparently. That's me many years ago, and a couple of fellow pastors, a staff, and the church that started in our basement grew to be a church of 400 adults plus kids, and we had a radio station and the whole thing, and did a lot of missionary work. Had the opportunity. One of the things I still really love about the fact that I became a Christian is I got to see a lot of really amazing things. So went to Russia 4 times, in Nigeria, been to Brazil and Nicaragua and Guatemala. Left that church in Northwest Missouri to be a teacher and instructor at a Bible college in the Philippines. So my wife at that time and 2 kids and went off to live on an island and live basically like Gilligan. That was my classroom, right? Not a bad gig. You get up every morning and that's where you teach. I would teach about Jesus if they'd let me go back there. Michelle would too. Came back from the Philippines, started another church in Northwest Missouri called The Edge, right? Because now churches have to be called The Way, The Edge, all these great, catchy, sickening names. Church did really well. Ended up being a church of about 600, and we were in 2 different locations. So I taught live at one location and then was broadcast to our downtown location. We bought this old Methodist church so people would watch the sermon on the screen, and this is that very first Sunday that we kicked off in this little church. So that was our second location. And if you look closely in the pictures, Michelle and her first husband, that's another story. And it was a great gig. I mean, I loved Jesus. I loved the ministry. I loved the people that I worked with. I loved doing good in the world. I loved the Bible, the gospel. I spent 20 years studying with all my heart, and I loved our staff, and one of them more than others. So take it.
I haven't seen these photos. I just want you to know. So for me, the year was not 1992. However, I was 24 years old when I converted. I also did not grow up in a religious home, didn't go to church every Sunday, didn't even go on Easter and Christmas. However, had friends who were involved in church, and so went to youth group occasionally and things like that. And my big takeaway from the limited experience I had with religion and Christianity in particular was that for girls in particular, if you wanted to grow up and be happy and have a good husband and a nice family and all these, you had to be a virgin, because no nice guy will want you if you are not. And so when I was 17 years old, I was raped. And that destroyed me because even though I was not religious, that had been ingrained in me, this idea that my worth and value was completely tied up in me being pure. And so when I lost that, I lost all hope for ever being happy or being in a relationship where I would be valued and respected, and it made me a very desperate and hopeless person. And so in the months following that, I did not report the incident, didn't tell anyone for about a decade. but in the months following that, just really fell into a dark place and engaged in a lot of self-destructive behavior. Became suicidal, drank a lot, and which only increases your opportunities to make poor choices and do things that you regret and are ashamed of. Long story short, despite what I had been told, probably 6 months after this, I did meet a nice young man, a nice family, asked me out on a date. I couldn't believe it. Clearly he didn't know that, I was damaged and worthless and all these things. But he asked me out. I said yes. We graduated this is my senior year, then in high school. 5 months after graduation, we were engaged. Then we were married. We had 2 kids. And then I'm 24. But I never dealt with this shame and this regret and all of these things, and just was really in a dark place. So that made me ripe for the picking, I guess. I got invited to a church, and someone explained to me how through a relationship with Jesus, you can be made new and whole. And, all the Psalms about being white as snow and wiping away all of your regret and your shame and your past, and I so desperately wanted that. And so I converted, had one of those miraculous overnight, completely changed everything, the way I dressed, the music I listened to. I stopped watching television and movies and got rid of all my sinful friends that like to go out and have fun, and devoted myself to reading and studying the Bible. And every time the doors were open on the church, I was there. I loved Jesus, believing that he was been forgiven much, loves much, and I had been forgiven a mountain. And so I loved him, and I lived my life for him. I also came to have a successful ministry in the years that I was involved in church. I'd done everything from children's ministry to youth group. I taught women and did church camp, lots of Christian counseling for women and couples, and just a little bit of everything. Oh, yes, and including, Nicaragua. My heart is in Nicaragua. Went several mission trips, and prior to leaving the church was actually in the process of becoming a full-time missionary. My husband and I had had purchased a tiny house, like 600 square feet, and sold 75% of our possessions in the plan to downsize and eventually move to be full-time missionaries in Nicaragua. And then...
So something was happening to me, or I spent 20 years as a full-time pastor, and something was happening to me along that road that I didn't even really realize was happening. My deconversion was kind of a lengthy process that I wasn't even really aware of. A few things took place. Firstly, started having some conversations with people that got me thinking, so when I became a Christian, I came into a group called Calvary Chapel, and it was all I knew. Like, I didn't know anything about Christianity. To me, Christianity was Calvary Chapel. So I went off, I get saved at Calvary. I go off to their Bible college within 18 months, and then I'm a Calvary Chapel pastor. And so the only people I talk to are Calvary Chapel pastors. The only books I read are the ones that are recommended, and approved by Calvary Chapel, and begin to live in this kind of little bubble. But over the course of that time, especially in the Philippines, I started to have conversations with people who were not of the same denomination that I was, and hearing just different views. Like, our view was, Jesus is coming back 7 years before, so the rapture takes place 7 years before the second coming, and all of these very specific views that we have, and then talking to people who saw things different ways. And it really got me thinking and made me realize, wow, there's more to Christianity than just my particular slice. And so it got me really thinking about what was true, and did I believe what was true, because there were differing opinions. During that time, the internet was coming into full bloom, and that was playing a huge role in my life too, because all of a sudden now I have access to information I didn't before. I have access to books and opinions and videos and things of that sort that I didn't previously have. And so now I'm just beginning to really look at my theology, and I'm making some changes. I'm changing from a from a pre-trib to post-trib, from premillennial to eventually amillennial, and lots of, if you don't know what any of that stuff is, consider yourself lucky. No need to go into it. But a lot of these things were slowly changing, the way I saw leadership within the church, and all of it was the result of the internet. And I'm just beginning to kind of grow. And then one of the things that was probably the biggest catalyst for me is I started a Wednesday night Bible study on eschatology, which is the study of the last things, so Revelation, Daniel, these sorts of things. And I really wanted to. By this point in my Christianity, I'm sick of easy answers. One of the things that really turned me off to even my own denomination was their propensity to say, this is the way it is. This is the answer can be summed up in 10 seconds. This is the answer. Anybody who doesn't see it this way is not really a serious student of the Word. They don't understand their Bible. And I was just so sick of that, because I realized that there were lots of good people who had different opinions on things. So when I came to this study of the book of Revelation, Daniel, and portions of the prophets, it's like, I'm going to do a fantastic job on this. I want to do this really well. So my whole idea was, I'm going to learn the 4 or 5 top views on everything, and I'm going to learn them very well, and I'm going to present them to the congregation in a way that is, I'm going to try and be unbiased as much as I can. Here are the views, and then I'll finish up by saying, well, this is the way that I lean, but you don't have to see it that way. I was realizing that there could be all kinds of shades within Christianity. We don't all have to believe exactly the same thing about the timing of the rapture. But during the course of this study of end times, it was interesting to me, because this guy's attacking the position of this other guy, and this Christian's attacking the position of this Christian, and this Christian's, and they're all kicking the legs out from one another. And one of the things that really began to trouble me is I felt like they're all right. He's pointing out that his position is hogwash, and he's pointing out that his position is hogwash, and if I was really being honest, they're both right. It doesn't seem that any of this is really genuine or legit. And so it really got me thinking, for the first time, it got me thinking critically about the Bible. Now, at this point, I'm still not thinking critically in the sense of, is the Bible true? That's not it. What I'm thinking about is I'm starting to look for bad arguments within the Bible. Who's using the text poorly? Who's being sloppy? Who's not being genuine? And that really was the beginning of the end for me, because once you turn a critical eye towards the Word, and I wasn't being critical, did God write this? I was just being critical, who's got the best theology? But it began to unfold from there. And the way that I describe it is really in terms of 2 folders in my brain. I think if any of you were ever Christians, you probably understand this. One folder for me contains all of the things that build and strengthen my faith, and I had a lot in that folder early on because I didn't know any better. So I was taught things like the list of names in Genesis chapter 5, the genealogy, that if you translate those into English, they spell out the gospel. Man appointed mortal sorrow, the blessed God shall come down, teaching his death shall bring the despairing rest or comfort. Isn't that amazing? If you translate the Hebrew words into English, you get this wonderful sentence that spells out the gospel of Jesus Christ, and it's written in Genesis chapter 5. And that was the kind of thing that's oh my gosh, man, that alone proves that the Bible is outside of time. The problem with that is that those names don't translate that way. It's not true. But when it's 1993 and there's no internet, and somebody in a suit or somebody behind a pulpit tells you that, and they're smart and they know the language, and what do you just receive it. And I was taught things like Daniel chapter 9, gave you the exact day that Jesus would ride into Jerusalem. That if you counted from the going forth of the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, you've got it's 360-day calendar. It's 49 sevens, right? It's 183,880 days. And if you count from March 14th, 445 BC, from the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until 183,880 days, you'd land on March, April 3rd, 32. And it's all that stuff. It's amazing. The Bible predicted to the day that the Messiah would come into Jerusalem. And if it really did, I wouldn't be standing here this morning. I'd still be a Christian if these things are true. But what happens, I go to teach this to the congregation. I thought, well, I better fact check this. And you start researching it and you realize it's not true. And so what was happening is that in the folder that I had of all these things that made me, move to an island and teach the Bible, that made me sacrifice my whole life, slowly those things are going into the other folder, in the second folder, It's the folder where you put the things that you don't really understand. Like even as a hardcore Jesus-loving Christian, I don't know why God in the Old Testament had commanded his people to kill babies. Go in and wipe out every living thing in the village. Like I don't get that. So you put that in the folder of, I'll find out one day. When I get to heaven, I'll know. But the way that I can deal with the fact that God told me to kill babies is I've got this other folder full of all these amazing things that build my faith. So I've got enough stuff in the faith folder to overcome these strange things in the doubt folder. But what was happening over 20 years without me even really knowing it is that little by little things were transferring from the faith folder to the what the heck folder. And on November 12th, 2012, I got up to do my quiet time with the Lord. I'm going to read my Bible, right? So I'm still a full-on believer at this point. And I get up and I read a passage about Jesus, casting demons into a herd of swine, and I was just like, man, that just kind of sounds made up. It's just, and so I thought, well, I'm gonna do some research on this. Anyways, long story short, I read this article that gives me the missing piece. I was wondering, where do all these demons come from in the New Testament? There's like no demons in the Old Testament. Into the New Testament, demons are everywhere. What's the reason for that? I read this article in a Jewish encyclopedia, and it was the final piece for me. And it was almost, the way I can describe it is like the bubble popped.
Well, there you go.
And the spell was broken. And I went from believer to unbeliever in the course of about 10 minutes. And just kind of almost just shook my head and woke up and went, whoa, that was weird. That was a weird 20 years. What the hell? And, so the question now is like, well, what do I do now? Like, I am pretty invested in this Christianity thing. At that time, I was just shy of 45 years old. I'm 45 years old. I have no formal education. I dropped out of secular college to go to Bible college. I've invested my entire adult life in the church and Jesus, Christianity. I'm a spiritual leader for 600 people. I've got a mortgage, and the church has a mortgage. We've got 2 locations. I'm married to a person that I do not connect with and do not really enjoy most of the time, but stayed married because I was a Christian. Like if you're a pastor, at least in my denomination, that I couldn't divorce and I couldn't leave her, and so I stayed married to somebody for Jesus because of Jesus, and it's like, man, my marriage is not going to survive me coming out as an unbeliever, and I didn't want to hurt people. I mean, I love the people at our church, I still do, and some of them I don't. There's some I don't, but it was just a really, really hard thing. And so what I chose to do, long story short, is I'm just going to do the best I can with what I have. I'd struggled my whole life as a church planter. You're poor because you're always starting. And I finally got to the point where I had health insurance, I had a decent income, staff, things were going really well. And it's like, man, I don't want to give all that up at this point in my life. I just wasn't sure what to do. So I thought, well, I'm going to do the best I can. So, we supported Big Brothers Big Sisters. We bought tons and tons of wheelchairs for disabled people in Nicaragua, and I just tried to do as much good as I could and preach enough Jesus so I didn't lose my job. So I get up on Sunday morning and I did this for 2 years. For 2 years, just trying to figure out it's an incredibly long story, but it was lonely. I was isolated. I felt like nobody knew me because nobody did. Like I couldn't tell anybody. And my own kids, at that time I still have 4 kids, but I had 2 when I went to the Philippines. But 4 kids, I'm like, my kids aren't going to know me. People aren't going to know me. It was just kind of miserable. And at the same time, So how did it? So a good question then, I think, is how does somebody preach the gospel for 2 years? How do you do that? And it makes me look like really scummy. I mean, there are people who hate my guts and think I'm just the worst person in the world. So I'll just give you a couple reasons why I did that for 2 years. Again, I loved the people at my church. I didn't want to hurt them. I really didn't. I loved the people I worked with. I didn't want to hurt them. Some people I work with I love more than others. We did a lot of good. What else was I going to do? And here's one of the things that this might make some people would look at this as perhaps a cop-out, but for me, one of the things I came to realize once I lost my faith is, well, church made a lot more sense. Like when all of a sudden I'm like, no wonder all these people are such a mess. There's no power behind it. Like we're all pretending, and that was the thing that made me, justify it to myself. I guess we can justify just about anything as humans. But for me, I felt like everybody on Sunday morning is pretending. We're all pretending that Jesus lives inside us. We're all pretending that we're filled with the Spirit. We're all pretending that He's coming back to take us to heaven. It's the whole thing. We're all pretending we have an imaginary friend. The only difference for me is that I knew that I was pretending. And so I felt like, well, if everybody's pretending and I'm pretending, and then I just happen to be the one who knows that I am. And I guess the number one reason why I did it for 2 years, and again, this may not sound fantastic, but I had sacrificed so much for truth, right? My whole life was about getting the truth out there. I wanted people to know the truth. And so, I missed weddings and funerals and birthdays, and all of my, family and nieces and nephews growing up by moving to Missouri. I'd sacrificed financially, I'd sacrificed socially, I'd sacrificed by staying married to this woman that I didn't really want to be married to. Sacrifice. And now I know this new truth, which is that it's all false. And now for the sake of truth, I need to sacrifice again. Like I need to start my life completely over again in the name of truth. And I was just like, I'm sick of sacrificing for truth. That's where I was at. I don't know how that makes you feel about me, but I'm just like, I am tired of starting over from scratch for the sake of this new truth. And it's like, forget it. I'm going to ride it out, do the best I can, and that's it. All right. I had a lot of great stuff. Okay. So how did it end? Yep, there we go. Am I taking too long? I am. No, sorry. Keep me on track here. So how did it eventually end? Well, as you may have guessed, I fell madly in love with someone that I work with. Michelle is. I admired her so much for years, and never said or did anything inappropriate. We had a very up and up business-like relationship. I was married, she was married. I didn't want to be one of those pastors that was, I have fallen, I kind of just never wanted to do that. So I didn't really work with her. I set up, I just made it so that I knew that pastors, sometimes did stupid stuff with ladies they work closely with, and it's like I didn't want any of that. So I kept my distance from her on purpose. But it didn't really help because just watching her staff meetings, seeing how she dealt with people, just her intellect, I just really, really admired her. And I thought she was hot. I'll leave that part out. So, we had nothing inappropriate going on. But the problem, though, is that she was ruining my atheism. Really, as an atheist, like I've got this great gig, I got a steady paycheck, my job's pretty easy by that point. Like I don't have to do anything I don't really want to do. I'm the boss, all right. And so financially we're good. I got this great gig, and so as somebody who believes that this is the only life we have, I'm like I'm going to enjoy this life as much as I possibly can. So I'm traveling Nicaragua, but I couldn't enjoy it with her around. So she was driving me nuts. She was the first thing I thought of when I woke up in the morning, last thing I thought of when I went to bed at night, and I realized I cannot stay in this position. Like, the morality of preaching a gospel you don't believe was not enough for me to leave. I'm sorry. What was enough for me to leave was like, she's ruining my life. Like I can't, and so I actually told my sister who lives in California about this. She's like, fire her. Just get rid of her, fire her. I'm like, I can't fire her, I love her. So I'm like, I'll just leave. Like, I need to go. Like, this is finally it. I'm gonna go, I'll find another job. I started submitting applications to some places. I'm like, I just need to get out of here because I can't be around her anymore. And then I thought, well, maybe like if I'm leaving anyway, like on the way out, I should just tell her, because maybe she feels the same way. I mean, she's never done anything inappropriate. Neither one of us had. But we were just so close and so compatible and so much alike and admired one another. And I thought, well, I think I'm going to tell her. And so I did. And you can take the story from here.
Yes. So, March 31st, 2015, James invited me to the church for a meeting, which is not out of the ordinary. I was one of 4 staff people, and we worked closely together on all sorts of things. So, thought not much of it. Sat me down in the sanctuary, and
trying to keep it holy.
Yeah, yes. Oh my gosh. And told me that he was an atheist. Shared his story with me, how, through the course of studying the Bible, he lost his faith, gave me some, specific examples of things that he'd struggled with, and blew my mind, because for 2 years, longer than that, for 5 years, I've been sitting in his congregation, listening to him preach, and we just returned from a mission trip to Nicaragua, where we baptized people and prayed with people, and when he preached, I had no idea that he did not believe every word that he was saying. I was shocked. So my response to that was, oh my gosh, I can't imagine, and I just felt really heartsick for him, because he'd been stuck for 2 years and had been so alone and had this secret that he didn't feel like he could tell anyone, and I just told him, gosh, that had to have been horribly difficult, and I can't imagine what that's like, and he was like, apparently that was the response he was looking for. Or he thought it went really well, and so he was like, well, since that went so well, there's something else I would like to tell you. And he told me that he loved me, and I was like, oh. I'm like, it was a lot. It was a March 31st, 2015, big day. It's a big day. So for me, that was the beginning of the end. One, because as he explained, I had in my years in ministry come across.
She said she loved me too. She skipped that part.
I was getting there. Living under this paradigm is this belief that the Bible is the inerrant word of the living God, and that the Holy Spirit dwells inside of me, and not just me, but my friends and family who are believers. In the years that I was in ministry, there were anomalies, little things that popped up that didn't quite make sense, didn't quite fit the paradigm, but so busy with ministry and teaching and counseling and volunteering and all of these sorts of things that I never really took the time to search for the truth. It's like, this doesn't seem quite right. This doesn't line up with Scripture. This seems really weird. But you just take the word of the book that you're reading, or the pastor that's standing in front of you, or, there are lots of really smart, articulate, well-educated people who believe, and they all have an answer, and so you just accept that and you move on, because I'm busy doing counseling and ministry and all these sorts of things. So lots of anomalies over the years. Having your pastor sit you down and tell you that he's an atheist and has been for 2 years, that's a big anomaly. That finally I was like, okay, whoa. For the first time, I had to stop and really look closely at these things, study the word, my beliefs, just scrutinize my long-held beliefs, considering the arguments, the positions of agnostics and atheists, something I never would have done before. And it just really got me thinking critically about all of these things. And then that, coupled with the fact that he said that he was madly in love with me, and we were close friends, never anything inappropriate or anything like that, but still, I married very young. And I know Christianity teaches you, right? Life is not about happiness, it's about holiness. And so you do what is right, regardless of whether it's enjoyable to you, because this life is but a vapor, and it's all about eternity. So you endure whatever you have to endure here. It doesn't really matter, because you're going to heaven, and that's where the good stuff happens. But confronted with the possibility that there is no eternity, that my beliefs are not, that it's not true, that this life could perhaps be the only life that I have. What if there is no hell? What if what if this is the only opportunity I have to truly be happy, to be understood, to be loved, to love someone. And also struggling with this idea because I also had made great sacrifices in my years as ministry and always tried to put other people ahead of myself. You make other people happiness. You sacrifice your own happiness in order to serve others. And I just found myself asking, or just when do I get to be happy? When do I get what I want? If there is no heaven, if there is no eternity, YOLO. I did that.
So how did it end? It ended abruptly and badly. Is basically so the original plan was what I called the orbiting plan, which is I love you, but you're married and I'm married, and I don't want to disrespect anybody, and so we will not ever touch. We'll never be together. I just felt like if you just know how I feel about you, and if I know that you love me too, then we'll just love one another from afar. Won't that be wonderful? And we'll never take it any further than that. And I'll be able to live. I can actually survive if I just know that you feel the same way about me as I feel about you. That was the plan. They came crashing down the next day. And so we decided, listen, we don't want to be liars. We don't want to be cheats. We don't want to be sneaking around. That is not who we are. It's not how we want to live. And so we instantly began to make plans, like how do we exit? How do we get out of here? And we had different, timelines, but at the end of the day, like, there's no way that you could do it where it wasn't going to cause an incredible amount of pain and confusion and suffering for the church and for our families. And so why prolong it? Why not just do it as quickly as possible? So we went from co-working friends to renting a house and living together in the course of 3.5 weeks. And of those 3.5 weeks, 10 days of which I was out of state. I was on a trip to California. So I mean, almost instantaneously. And we just ripped the Band-Aid off really fast. And we moved in. And of course now we're married. We got married 3 months ago. But these are our 7 children together. We have about 50% custody of. Michelle has full 50%. I'm not quite there, but so the girl in front is Madeline. She has cerebral palsy and is in a wheelchair. But then, so starting from the back, there's Jonas, and then Mallory, and then Jacob, and then in the middle is Maya. On the right is Max. To the left is Ben, and then Maddie in front, and 7 kids. It's an amazing life. It's good, and sometimes sometimes your expectations are so high that the reality is hard to take. That's not been the case for us. That each one of us, we feel like we're exactly who we thought we were, and we're happy, and it's fantastic. Now, this would be a great place to stop, and we could be done here. If you would indulge us, here's what we really wanted to get to in the talk, just as quickly as possible, because one of the things that just gets me thinking, like when you give 20 years of your life to something that you no longer believe, that's hard. Like, how the heck did that happen to me? How did it happen to Michelle? Like, what brought about this incredible, like, we were believers, and how does that take place? And so, just very quickly, and because what we're trying to do, remember this quote here, this is from the Dalai Lama, only the development of compassion and understanding for others can bring us the tranquility and happiness that we all seek. So just for the next couple minutes here, we want to try and give you some understanding, especially if you don't come from a Christian background. You might look at your Facebook feed and see your Christian friends and think, these people are idiots, right? You ever look at religious people and just think, you are so dumb, right? And that's not the case. So because we weren't any more dumb then than we are now. So just trying to figure out, like, how does this happen to people? So we believe that there's kind of a perfect storm that needs to take place to create a zealot. Like, how is a zealot born? We're not just talking about someone who goes to church on Christmas and Easter. Oh, that's fine. It's 2 times more a year than I think you should. But we were zealous. How does that happen? I think there's a perfect storm that takes place in order to to bring that about. Firstly, in order for a zealot to be born, that person has to desire some sort of change. For me, it was, I want to get sober, I want to quit smoking pot every day, I'm living in a friend's garage. Like, I was desperate for change. For Michelle, it was, she wanted to feel, forgiven and clean and a fresh start, and she felt like her life had been destroyed. And so a lot of times what brings about the making of a zealot is the incredible need for change.
Also, the second component is you need to hear the story from someone who can articulate it clearly. And because lots of people are exposed to the gospel, but if you find yourself sitting in front of a well-educated and articulate person who can tell the story of Jesus and his forgiveness and all these sorts of things, you get a good presentation of the facts, then it's easy to believe.
Yeah, and these things all have to come together. Like, you have to have we really want to change, but if you really want to change and you go to a church that's just weird and nobody explained it in a good way, then it's not going to take. But if you really want to change and you happen to meet the right person who can explain it well, and then the third component is some sort of social support. And for both of us, we instantly, join Bible studies and groups, and all of a sudden we have friends. And when those three things come together, a real need, someone who can explain it, and you start making some friends, then boom, the next thing that happens is the bubble is formed, and you live in Christian land under the dome, so to speak. And then that bubble is sustained. It's created in that perfect storm of need, the right story, and social connections, and then it's sustained in a number of different ways. I think one of the things that sustains it is the power of the pulpit. When you're sitting there and you're listening to somebody who's sincere, and they seem like they know what they're talking about, and they're saying they've got a pulpit. Like, you don't have a pulpit, they have a pulpit. They must know what they're talking about. And when you hear those things, you just assume that when somebody tells you the gospel is written in Genesis chapter 5, that it is, and that Daniel chapter 9 tells you the exact day that Jesus would ride in Jerusalem. You just believe that it's true, and the power of the pulpit is an amazing thing.
And also social connections. I know for us leaving, that was one of the hardest things about leaving the church, because lots of my family had converted, all of my friends and my coworkers, all of my social connections are within this community. And so when you leave that, you lose all of those. But those social connections, getting involved, like all of your outings and the things you're doing, you're spending all of this time with this new community. And community, as we know, is essential in life.
And you all read the same things, believe the same things, listen to the same things. The other thing that helps sustain the bubble is the idea that opposition actually breeds greater confidence. Like the fact that the scientists are against Christianity. Well, Jesus said there would be opposition, right? And so the government, they're against us, and the scientists are against us, and anybody who tries to bring you some reason to not believe Christianity, Jesus said that there would be wolves and all of this. And so there's a kind of this us versus them mentality in Christianity that isolates you and makes you distrustful of any other point of view.
And there's a tremendous confirmation bias because, as you said, like you get in this circle, and so you're involved in Bible study, and you're all reading the same books, and you seek out. Then you're not considering the positions of agnostics or atheists or scientists. You are reading authors, who are writing about the truth, how you can know these things are true. And so the tendency is just that you selectively search for things that confirm what you already believe, and you just reaffirm and reaffirm those beliefs. And if you start to doubt, then you find something that'll help build your faith, and the confirmation bias will just keep you kind of isolated from other ideas and possibilities.
That's true. And then, just a general distrust of the media and the government and all of those facts. It's all a conspiracy. Neil deGrasse Tyson, he says the things he does because he wants to live a wickedly sinful life. And I think the overwhelming amount of scientists in prison proves that they desire to live sinful lives. And so that was what it was for us. It's this perfect storm. If we really had a need, we wanted into the right church at the right time, we made some connections, and then those things are fostered through all the reasons that we just gave, and the power of the pulpit and social connections and all of that. And you live under the dome, and you can do it for decades. Some people do it their entire lives, and that's where we were. And so, wrapping it all up, closing over.
Right. So we're back in our quotes. Only the development of compassion and understanding for others can bring us the tranquility and happiness we seek. We really want to. It's hard for us because when we left, as you can imagine, I mean, we hurt a lot of people, and hurt people. So the response, the reaction that we got from our friends and people in the church was vicious and relentless. We were accosted at the grocery store, in the gas station. People showed up at our house at 9:30 at night. We got text and phone calls and Facebook messages, and it was very, very difficult, painful. So it's easy sometimes to slip into that like anger and Christianity is so stupid. It's easy to get frustrated, right? But we were those people, and we really want to. We don't want to be those people that bash religion, that think religious people are dumb, or because we were those people, and we know that those things are not true. We want to foster understanding and compassion because human hands solve human problems, and we need to work together. All of us. People are more important than beliefs, and that includes like religious people, right? Not just like we kind of say that like people are more important than beliefs, and so you should respect me because I don't believe in your God. But that's a two-way street, and we need to respect their belief in God because they're still people, and they're not stupid. They might be deceived or what.
That's the point of the whole talk. Like, if you can see how it happened to us and how how we lived in that bubble for 2 decades, then maybe that gives you some compassion and understanding for that family member or friend that you have, a coworker. Because it's when we label somebody as an idiot, like you're just so dumb. How can you believe that? It's dumb. The moment you label them as an idiot, number one, you're wrong because they're probably not. Some of them probably are, but most likely they're not. And then when you label someone as an idiot, it gives you the permission to stop listening, right? And so if we all label half the country as idiotic, then we don't have to listen to them anymore because we've written them off, and I just don't think that we're going to solve any real problems. So understanding how it comes about, having some compassion, and I think is a really important thing, and that's why we came today. So thanks you guys so much. This is our brewed